The first gunshot sounded before the priest finished, asking if anyone objected. It cracked through the cathedral, like thunder trapped beneath stained glass. Every head turned, every breath stopped, and Lila Everhart, still holding a bouquet of white orchids with trembling fingers, watched the man she had spent 6 months trying to forget walk through the cathedral doors in a black suit, rain dripping from his shoulders, blood drying along the side of his jaw, and murder in his eyes. No one screamed at first, not because they were calm, because the man entering the church was Cassian Vale, and in Chicago, people knew better than to make noise when the king of the Vale crime family arrived uninvited. The cathedral was packed with hospital donors, politicians, surgeons, police captains pretending not to recognize criminals, and 300 guests wearing expensive clothes and polite lies. The altar glowed with candlelight. White roses climbed the marble pillars. A choir stood frozen beneath the balcony. Rain hammered the stained glass windows, so hard it sounded like the city itself was begging to be let in. Lila stood at the altar in a lace wedding gown she had never loved, beside a man she had almost convinced herself she could marry. Dr. Ethan Calder was everything safe men were supposed to be. Respected, handsome, predictable, a trauma surgeon with gentle hands, perfect teeth, and a family name clean enough to make hospital boards smile. He had proposed in front of a fountain. He had offered her security. He had promised her a future that did not smell like gunpowder, whiskey, expensive cologne, and midnight secrets. But when Cassian Vale stepped into the aisle, every promise Ethan had made suddenly felt like paper held too close to fire. Cassian did not hurry. He never did. 2 black SUVs sat outside the cathedral with their headlights cutting through the rain. Armed men in dark coats stood beneath umbrellas beyond the open doors, but Cassian walked alone. He moved down the aisle with the terrifying calm of a man who owned the room before anyone agreed to give it to him. His dark hair was wet and pushed back from his face. His black suit jacket clung to his broad shoulders. A white shirt was open at the collar, stained faintly with blood near his ribs. His eyes never left Lila. Not once. Not even when Ethan stepped forward. "Get out," Ethan said, his voice shaking just enough for everyone to hear it. Cassian stopped halfway down the aisle. His gaze slid to Ethan. Slow and cold. "I wasn't speaking to you." The room dropped another degree. Lila's heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. Her veil trembled around her face. She had dreamed of this moment in 100 different nightmares, but in every nightmare, Cassian arrived too late. In this one, he had come before she said the words, before she made the mistake permanent, before she buried the only dangerous truth she had ever wanted. The priest swallowed. "Mr. Vale, this is a sacred..." Cassian lifted one hand slightly. The priest stopped. No threat, no shout, just a gesture. That was the terrifying thing about Cassian Vale. He did not need to raise his voice to remind people how easily their lives could disappear. Lila forced herself to breathe. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice sounded smaller than she wanted it to. Cassian looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his controlled expression fractured for half a second. Fine, fury, relief, obsession. All of it passed through his eyes before the mask returned. "You shouldn't be marrying him." A ripple moved through the guests. Ethan gave a tight, humorless laugh. "This is pathetic. You think you can walk into a wedding and intimidate a woman into choosing you?" Cassian tilted his head. "No." He looked back at Lila. "I came because she's being hunted." The words landed like a blade. Lila's fingers tightened around the bouquet. "What?" Cassian reached into the inside pocket of his suit. Half the room flinched. He noticed, and a faint, dangerous contempt touched his mouth, before he pulled out a small black phone instead of a weapon. He held it up. On the screen was a photo. Lila could not see it clearly from the altar, but Ethan could. and whatever he saw drained the color from his face. Cassian noticed that too. Of course he did. "I object," Cassian said quietly. "Not because I want the bride, not because I am jealous, not because I care what vows she says in a room full of cowards." His eyes darkened. "I object because the man beside her ordered her death this morning." The cathedral erupted. Gasps. Chairs scraping. A woman crying out. Someone dropped a champagne flute in the back, even though the reception had not begun. Ethan stepped toward Cassian, but two of Cassian's men entered from the doorway, and Ethan stopped as if the floor had turned to ice beneath his shoes. "That's insane," Ethan said. "You're a criminal. You're obsessed with her. Everyone knows it. This is what you do. You manipulate. You threaten. You destroy anything you can't own." Cassian's jaw flexed, but his eyes stayed on Lila. "I never owned her." That sentence, soft as it was, hit her harder than the gunshot. Because it was true. Cassian had protected her, watched her, infuriated her, saved her life twice, and ruined her sleep for months. But he had never called her his, not even on the night she had stitched a knife wound under his ribs in the abandoned west wing of St. Adrian's Hospital, while his enemies searched 3 floors below. Not even when he had looked at her with fever in his eyes and whispered, "Tell me to leave, Lila. Say it like you mean it, and I'll walk out bleeding." She had not said it. That was the problem. She had never said it like she meant it. Ethan turned sharply toward her. "Lila, don't listen to him." But Lila was watching Cassian, and Cassian was watching the balcony. His expression changed before anyone else realized danger had moved into the room. His hand went under his jacket. "Down," he said. Lila did not understand. Then the stained glass window above the altar shattered. A bullet ripped through the place where her head had been 1 second before. Cassian moved like violence given human form. He crossed the aisle in 3 strides, shoved Ethan aside, and slammed into Lila just as another shot cracked through the cathedral. His body covered hers as they crashed behind the altar rail. Marble bit into her shoulder. Her bouquet exploded in petals across the floor. Guests screamed now. Real screams. The cathedral became chaos. Candles fell. The choir scattered. Men in black suits surged through the doors. Ethan shouted her name, but Cassian's arm locked around her waist and dragged her beneath the shelter of the altar. "Look at me," he ordered. Lila's ears rang. "Cassian, are you hit?" "No." "Lila, are you hit?" "No." His hand moved over her shoulder, her side, her waist, checking for blood with a terrifying efficiency that made her remember every night he had come into her ER half dead, and still more worried about whether she was safe than whether he would survive. Another bullet struck the marble statue behind them. Stone dust rained over her veil. Cassian pulled the veil away from her face, not gently, but carefully enough not to hurt her. His eyes burned into hers. "You were going to marry him." The accusation was quiet, almost worse because of it. Lila's throat tightened. "This is not the time." It became the time when someone tried to put a bullet through your heart during the vows. She stared at him, furious and terrified, because even with gunfire echoing through a cathedral, he still had the power to make the whole world shrink down to his eyes. "Why are they shooting at me?" Cassian looked away for half a second. That was enough to frighten her more than the bullets. "Because 6 months ago," he said, "you saved my life." The doors to the sacristy burst open. One of Cassian's men appeared. "Boss, east exit is clear for now." "For now?" Lila snapped. The man looked at her, then quickly at Cassian, as if unsure whether nurses in wedding gowns were allowed to speak during assassinations. Cassian stood, pulling Lila up with him. She stumbled in heels and lace. He caught her instantly. "Take her out," he ordered. "I can walk," she said. "No." "No?" He leaned down until his face was close to hers. "There are 2 shooters, maybe 3. One above the balcony, one outside the south window, and one person in this room who knew exactly where you would be standing. So no, Dr. Everhart, you don't get to argue with me today. Herr Pulsestudel, Dr. Everhart. He only called her that when he was trying not to say something else. Behind them, Ethan appeared from between overturned chairs, wild-eyed and pale. Lila, come with me. He's using this. He staged this. Cassian turned slowly. Something about that movement made Ethan stop again. Lila saw it then. A flicker in Ethan's eyes. Not fear of the gunman. Fear of Cassian knowing too much. Cassian smiled without warmth. Interesting choice of words. Ethan's face tightened. You're a murderer. I am many things, Cassian said. Careless is not one of them. Lila's stomach twisted. Ethan, she whispered. What did he show you on that phone? Ethan looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, his face was not kind. It was calculating, and that terrified her more than Cassian's blood-stained suit. Nothing real, Ethan said. Cassian handed her the phone. Lila looked down. On the screen was a security still from Street Adrian's hospital loading dock, time-stamped 4:16 that morning. Ethan stood beside a black sedan, speaking to a man Lila did not recognize. The next image was a text message. Bride must not leave cathedral alive. Payment clears after confirmation. Her fingers went numb. The phone almost slipped from her hand. Ethan took one step toward her. That is fabricated. Cassian moved in front of her before Ethan finished the sentence. Not dramatic, not emotional, instinctive, protective. A wall of black suit, broad shoulders, and controlled rage. Say another lie to her, Cassian said softly. And I will forget. We are in a church. Ethan's mouth trembled. Then the emergency lights died. The cathedral plunged into darkness. For 1 second, there was only rain, screams, and the smell of smoke. Then Cassian's hand found Lila's. Strong, warm, certain. Run. They ran through the sacristy as gunfire opened behind them. Lila's wedding dress caught on a broken piece of wood. Cassian did not slow. He turned, ripped the lace clean with one brutal pull, and lifted her over the debris as if she weighed nothing. This dress cost $8,000, she gasped, breathless and half hysterical. You hated it. She stared at him even while running. How would you know that? He kicked open a side door into a narrow stone corridor, lit only by storm-gray windows. Because you looked dead every time you wore it. That hurt, because it was true. They burst through a side exit into the rain. Cold water hit her bare shoulders like needles. Cassian pulled her close beneath his coat without asking permission. His men formed a moving shield around them, black umbrellas turning into dark wings in the storm. A bullet struck one of the SUVs. Glass burst outward. Cassian shoved Lila into the back seat and climbed in after her. Drive, he ordered. The SUV lunged forward before the door fully closed. Lila twisted toward the rear window. The cathedral vanished behind rain and headlights. People were running down the steps. Police sirens wailed somewhere far away. Ethan stood beneath the cathedral archway, not chasing her, just watching. And for the first time, Lila wondered how long she had been sleeping beside a lie. Cassian pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. Lock down the North Bridge. Send men to the hospital. Nobody touches Ward C. Nobody enters her apartment. Find the shooter alive. He paused. His eyes moved to Lila. And find Calder before I do. Lila's chest tightened. Ethan's not. Cassian's gaze sharpened. She stopped. She did not know what Ethan was anymore. The SUV sped through rain-slick streets. Chicago blurred around them in silver and red streaks. Lila sat in torn lace, soaked curls sticking to her cheeks, mascara burning under her eyes, and Cassian Vale beside her looking like he had walked out of hell just to drag her away from the altar. She should have felt kidnapped. Instead, She felt alive for the first time in 6 months, and that made her hate herself. She turned on him. "You don't get to do this." Cassian did not look away from the window. "Save you? Storm into my wedding. Accuse my fiancé of murder. Drag me into your car." "Ex-fiancé. I didn't say that. You didn't finish the vows. Because someone shot at me." "Exactly." She let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. It sounded close to breaking. Cassian finally looked at her. His expression changed. The fury softened at the edges. For one dangerous second, the feared Cassian Vale disappeared, and she saw the man who had once sat silently beside a sleeping pediatric patient because Lila had asked him not to let the child wake up alone. "Don't," she whispered. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't what? Look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you have the right to be hurt." The words hung between them, crueler than she meant them to be. His face went still, very still. Then he leaned back, putting a few inches of cold air between them. "You're right. Lila Everhart." Cassian looked out at the rain. "I lost that right when I let you believe leaving me would keep you safe." The SUV went silent, except for the storm. 6 months earlier, Lila had met Cassian Vale at 2:13 inches the morning, when he was carried into Street Adrian's hospital with 3 bullet wounds and no identification. The men with him had not asked for a doctor. They had asked for her. She had been 29, exhausted, surviving on vending machine coffee and stubborn compassion, assigned to night trauma because she could stay calm when everyone else panicked. At first, he had been just another bleeding man with a dangerous face and a stubborn refusal to die. Then he opened his eyes while she was pressing gauze to his chest and said, "You're not afraid." She had snapped, "I don't have time to be." He had almost smiled. That was the beginning of the problem. For weeks after, he appeared in her life like a shadow refusing to stay on the wall. A black car outside the hospital when she left late. A coffee, exactly the way she liked it, placed at the nurse's station without explanation. A hospital wing mysteriously repaired after she complained about broken heat. A violent patient who had threatened her transferred before sunrise. She had told him to stop. He had said, "No." She had said, "You can't just decide to protect me." He had said, "I already did." And then one night, when a rival family attacked the ER because Cassian was inside, Lila had held his artery closed with her bare hands while bullets hit the glass around them. He had looked at her like she was the only holy thing left in a ruined world. After that, something between them crossed a line neither of them named. They never kissed. That was the worst part. There had been no clean sin to blame. Just nights, looks, silence. His hand on the small of her back during chaos, her fingers lingering too long when checking his pulse. The unbearable intimacy of saving a man everyone else feared. Then Cassian disappeared for 3 weeks. When he returned, cold and distant, he told her she had become a liability. He told her he had watched enough innocent people die. He told her, "Marry someone safe, Lila." So she tried. God help her. She tried. The SUV turned sharply into an underground garage beneath the old Blackwell Hotel, a place Lila knew had been closed for renovation for years. Security gates closed behind them. Men moved everywhere, armed and silent, phones pressed to ears. Cassian stepped out first and offered his hand. She stared at it. He waited. Rain dripped from his cuff. Finally, she took it. His fingers closed around hers, and the contact moved through her body like a memory with teeth. He led her through a service elevator up to a private floor. The doors opened into a penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the storm, dark wood floors, low amber lamps, and a table covered in maps, photos, and surveillance stills. Lila stopped. On one wall were pictures: her hospital entrance, her apartment building, her car, Ethan, the cathedral, her dress fitting. Her blood went cold. She turned to Cassian slowly. "You were watching me." He did not deny it. She slapped him. The sound cracked across the room. Every man in the penthouse froze. Cassian's head turned slightly with the force of it. When he looked back, there was no anger in his eyes, only acceptance. Lila's palm burned. You had no right. No. You followed me. Yes. You watched me try on my wedding dress? His jaw tightened. I watched the exits. That's not an answer. It's the only one that keeps me from sounding worse. She laughed once, bitter and shaking. You think there's a version of this where you don't sound worse? No. Then why? His gaze dropped to the torn edge of her dress, then returned to her face. Because 3 weeks after I left you alone, a man from the Morricone family followed you from the hospital to your apartment. Here Anger faltered. Cassian continued. Calm and brutal. You stopped for groceries. He waited in the produce aisle for 17 minutes. You bought green apples, chamomile tea, and those terrible frozen dumplings you pretend are dinner. He followed you into the parking garage. My man stopped him before he reached your car. Lila stared. Her stomach turned. Cassian's voice lowered. He had a knife, a syringe, and a photo of you. She stepped back. No. Yes? Why didn't you tell me? Because the next day you smiled at Calder in the hospital cafeteria. The confession was quiet, not jealous, wounded. I thought maybe Safe had finally found you. I thought if I stayed far enough away, the danger would lose interest. Lila swallowed hard. And did it? Cassian's mouth curved without humor. No. A woman entered from the far room carrying a medical bag. She was in her 50s, severe-faced, with silver hair in a bun, and the sharp eyes of someone who had seen too many powerful men bleed. Sit, she said to Cassian. I'm fine, Mera. You're bleeding through a $6,000 shirt. Lila looked down. Blood had darkened Cassian's side. Her nurse instincts surged before her heartbreak could stop them. You're shot? Grazed. Mara snorted. He says that when organs are visible. Lila moved before she decided to. Take off the jacket. Cassian's eyes flicked to hers. You don't have to. I know. That answer did something to him. Something visible. He obeyed. Slowly, he removed the jacket. Then the shirt. His body was all hard lines, old scars, fresh blood, and control stretched too thin. A bullet had torn along his ribs. Not fatal, but ugly. He must have been hit before entering the church. Before objecting. Before saving her. Lila pressed gauze to the wound harder than necessary. He barely reacted. You were bleeding the whole time. Yes. You still walked down the aisle like a dramatic psychopath. His mouth twitched faintly. It was a wedding. I dressed appropriately. She looked up despite herself. For half a second, the absurdity almost broke her. Then she saw blood on his skin and remembered he had come injured because someone wanted her dead. Her hands gentled without permission. Cassian noticed. Of course he did. His voice dropped. Don't do that. Do what? Be kind to me when you're still angry. She looked at the wound. I'm a nurse. No? His eyes held hers. You're Lila. The room seemed to quiet around them. Mara cleared her throat and stepped back as if she had suddenly remembered somewhere else to be. Lila cleaned the wound with practiced hands, trying not to remember the first time she touched him like this, trying not to remember him watching her, as if pain was nothing compared to her leaving the room. Did Ethan know? She asked. Cassian's expression hardened. I think he knew enough. That's not an answer. It's the truth until I prove more. She taped gauze against his ribs. He asked me to transfer hospitals after the wedding. Cassian went still. What? Lila nodded slowly as the memory returned with new, sickening clarity. Seattle. Private clinic. He said I was burning out. He said we could start over away from the city. Cassian's eyes became lethal. When? Last week? Did you agree? I said I'd think about it. Cassian stood so abruptly she stepped back. Cassian. He turned toward one of his men. Find the clinic. Find who owns it. Find every shell company, every payment, every dead nurse they buried under a resignation letter. The man left immediately. Lila's skin chilled. Dead nurse? Cassian looked at her, and she saw the answer before he spoke. There were others? His silence was confirmation. Lila sat down slowly on the edge of the table. The wedding, the transfer, the surveillance, the attempted shooting. Ethan's face when he saw the phone. Everything inside her tilted. How many? Cassian's voice was low. 3 women connected to me through medical channels have disappeared in the last 2 years. The words barely made sense. Connected how? One treated my brother. One forged blood reports to save a child I was hiding. One saw a face she wasn't supposed to see. And me? Cassian looked at her like the answer cost him. You saved me when every enemy I had wanted me dead. Her throat tightened. So this is revenge. Partly. What's the other part? His jaw worked. For the first time, Cassian Vale looked like he wanted to lie and could not. Punishment. For you. For me. The rain tapped against the windows. Lila stared at him. Cassian looked away first. They couldn't reach me, so they reached for the only thing I had ever looked at too long. The sentence entered her like a slow blade. The only thing I had ever looked at too long. She should have hated him for it. Part of her did. But another part, the reckless and ruined part, wanted to know how long he had been suffering under the weight of wanting her and refusing to touch. A phone rang. Cassian answered. Listened. His expression changed. Not fear. Something worse. Recognition. Put it on speaker. A man's voice filled the room. Distorted, but amused. Beautiful ceremony, Cassian. Shame you ruined it before the bride got to say yes. Lila Froze. Cassian's eyes went black. Where is Calder? The voice chuckled. Dr. Calder is reconsidering his loyalties. Lila stood. Cassian lifted a hand slightly, warning her not to speak. She ignored him. Who is this? There was a pause. Then the voice softened. Ah, the bride lives. Cassian's entire body went still. The voice continued. You should have married the doctor, Lila. Safe men are useful. Dangerous men make widows, Cassian said. Say her name again, and I'll mail your tongue to your mother. The man laughed. You always were sentimental. That's why your father considered you weak. Lila looked at Cassian. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes went colder. Or maybe he was right, the man said. Maybe a woman in scrubs really can make the Wolf of Vale kneel. Cassian's fingers tightened around the phone. You want me, he said. Come for me. Oh, we did. But she looked so pretty in white. The line clicked dead. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Cassian threw the phone across the room, so hard it shattered against the wall. Lila flinched. Not because she feared him, because she felt the rage coming off him like heat. Who was that? Cassian turned away. Cassian. He braced both hands on the table. Head bowed. My uncle. The room seemed to shrink. Your uncle tried to kill me. My uncle started the war that killed my mother, my brother, and half my family. Then he disappeared. Lila whispered. Why is he back? Cassian looked over his shoulder at her. Because I found out he never left. Before she could ask what that meant, the elevator opened, and 2 men entered, dragging someone between them. Ethan. His face was bruised. His tuxedo was soaked. His hands were zip-tied in front of him. He looked terrified now. Truly terrified. But when his eyes found Lila, he performed concern like a man putting on a coat. Lila, he breathed. Thank God. She did not move. Cassian stood between them. Ethan looked at him. Tell your animal to let me go. Cassian's voice was soft. You don't want me to start giving animals instructions. Lila stepped around him despite the warning in his posture. Ethan looked at her with desperate softness. Lila, please. He's lying. He took you because he couldn't stand seeing you happy. Were you at the loading dock this morning? Ethan blinked. What? Answer me. I meet people at the hospital all the time. donors, patients, families. At 4:16 in the morning, his mouth closed. Cassian watched silently. Lila felt her heart break in slow, humiliating pieces. "Did you know they were going to shoot me?" Ethan's face twisted. "No," but he answered too quickly. Lila stepped back. Ethan lunged forward as far as the men holding him allowed. "I didn't know it was today. I swear to God I didn't know they would do it at the wedding." The room went silent. Lila stopped breathing. Ethan realized what he had said. His eyes widened. Cassian moved. 1 second he was still. The next, his hand was around Ethan's throat, driving him back against the wall hard enough to rattle framed glass. Lila gasped. Cassian's face was inches from Ethan's. "You gave them her schedule." Ethan clawed at his wrist. Cassian squeezed. "You gave them the dress fitting, the cathedral entrance, the altar position." "Cassian!" Lila shouted. He did not release him. His voice was almost gentle. "Did you promise them she would be standing on the left because her good side was toward the guests?" Ethan's face turned red. Lila's stomach heaved, because she had told Ethan that, laughing, in Bill. She had said she hated how the veil fell over her scar on the right side of her collarbone, a scar from a hospital attack Cassian had caused by existing in her life. Ethan had kissed the scar and said she was beautiful. Then he had given that information to the men trying to kill her. "Stop," Lila whispered. Cassian did not seem to hear. "Cassian, stop." He released Ethan. Ethan collapsed to the floor, coughing. Cassian turned away, breathing once, twice, fighting himself back into human shape. Lila stared at Ethan. She waited to feel rage. But what came first was grief, humiliation, the sick realization that safety had been another kind of cage. "Why?" she asked. Ethan looked up, eyes watering. "You don't understand. That is what guilty men say before they make things worse. They had my father." Lila went still. Ethan swallowed hard. "My father owed money to people he should never have dealt with. Victor Vale's people. They came to me. They said all I had to do was marry you, convince you to transfer, keep you away from Cassian, until they finished their business." Cassian's voice was deadly quiet. "What business?" Ethan did not look at him. Cassian took one step. Ethan blurted, "The hospital records." Lila turned slowly. "What hospital records?" Ethan looked at her, ashamed now, but still cowardly enough to want sympathy. "The night Cassian came in, you entered something into the trauma system. A blood type, a genetic marker. I don't know. They said it proved something." Cassian's face changed. Lila saw it. A crack in the armor. "What?" she whispered. Cassian said nothing. Ethan looked confused by his reaction. "They said if anyone found it, Cassian would lose everything." Lila turned to Cassian. "What is he talking about?" Cassian looked at the city beyond the windows, for the first time since the cathedral. He looked afraid. Not of death, of truth. "Cassian." He closed his eyes briefly. "My father wasn't my father." The words were quiet. Ethan went still. Lila barely understood. Cassian continued, each word controlled. "The blood work you ran that night showed I was not biologically related to the man who raised me. I asked Mara to bury the record. Mara, standing near the doorway, looked down. Lila's mind raced back to that night. The emergency transfusion, the rare blood marker, the genetic flag she had dismissed because she was trying to keep him alive, not rewrite his family history. "Why would that matter?" she asked. Cassian looked at her. "Because in my family, blood is law." The penthouse fell silent. Ethan whispered, "That's why Victor came back." Cassian's gaze cut to him. Ethan flinched. "He wants the Vale Empire. If he proves you're not blood, he can challenge me," Cassian finished. Lila stared at him. All at once, the war was not abstract. It was inside his body. Inside a medical record she had created. Inside the secret Cassian had hidden not to protect himself, but to protect an empire that would devour anyone near him, including her. So Victor needed me dead, she said slowly, because I could confirm the record. Cassian's jaw tightened. Yes, and Ethan was supposed to marry me so he could control where I went. Yes, and then what? Her voice cracked. A honeymoon accident? A private clinic disappearance? Another nurse buried under a resignation letter? Ethan sobbed once. I was trying to protect my father. Lila looked at him with such coldness that even Cassian turned to watch her. You sold me in a wedding dress? Ethan lowered his head. Something inside, Lila ended. Not violently, quietly, like a door closing. She turned to Cassian. What happens now? His expression was guarded. Now I get you out of the city. No. Lila. No. She stepped closer, still in torn lace, barefoot now because her heels had vanished somewhere between the cathedral and the storm. I am done being moved like a piece on a board. Ethan moved me. Victor aimed at me. You watched me. Everyone keeps deciding where I am safest. Cassian's eyes darkened. Because everyone trying to kill you has guns. And I have the record. His face hardened. No, you don't even know what I'm about to say. I know the shape of your bravery. It gets people killed. She flinched. His regret was immediate. But she did not let him speak. You think protection means locking every door around me. Protection means you keep breathing. No, Cassian. That's survival. Protection is different. He stared at her. She stepped close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. Protection means trusting me enough to stand beside you while I'm still breathing. His eyes moved over her face. Rain streaked the windows behind him. Sirens wailed faintly below. Somewhere in the city, men were preparing to kill for bloodlines, records, power, and vengeance. But in that room, the most dangerous silence was between a Mafia king and a nurse in a ruined wedding dress. Cassian spoke first. If you stand beside me, they will never stop coming. Lila smiled sadly. They came when I was standing beside Ethan. His gaze dropped. She touched the edge of the bandage on his ribs. You told me to marry someone safe. I was wrong. The admission was so simple that it almost broke her. Cassian looked back up. I was wrong the moment I thought a safe man could love you better than a dangerous one who would burn for you. Lila's breath caught. Ethan made a sound from the floor. Lila, please. She did not look at him. Cassian's voice lowered. Tell me to put him somewhere he can't hurt you again. Lila closed her eyes. For one terrifying second, she wanted to. Not because she was cruel, because betrayal had teeth, and hers were still buried in her heart. But she opened her eyes and looked at Cassian. No killing him. Cassian's face revealed nothing. She lifted her chin. That's not who I am. I know. Do you? His voice softened. It's the only thing about this world I'm sure of. She nodded once. Then use him. Make him testify. Make him useful. But do not make me the reason you cross another line. Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Put Dr. Calder in the secure room. Alive. Untouched. If he sneezes without permission, record it. Ethan sagged with relief. Cassian added, without looking away from Lila. If anyone outside this room learns where he is, I'll assume the leak is standing near me. Every man in the room stiffened. Good, Lila thought. Let them fear something. Hours passed in blue stormlight. Lila changed out of the destroyed wedding gown into black trousers, a white shirt, and an oversized dark coat Cassian gave her without comment. She found out later it was his. She pretended not to notice the way his scent clung to the collar. Cassian's people turned the penthouse into a war room. Phones rang. Maps changed. Names appeared on screens. The old hospital record was recovered from a hidden backup server at Street Adrian's, but part of it was corrupted. They needed the physical emergency intake ledger stored in the hospital archives, the one Lila had signed manually during the system crash that night. Without it, Victor could create any version of the truth he wanted. With it, Cassian could expose the conspiracy. Not that the truth would save him in the Mafia world, but it would reveal who had helped Victor from inside Cassian's own organization, because someone had known about the blood marker. Someone close. At 2:04 a.m., Nara placed a cup of coffee beside Lila. "You look like you're planning something stupid." Lila took the cup. "I'm a nurse. We call it triage." Mara almost smiled. "He won't let you go to the hospital. He doesn't let anyone do anything. I've noticed. Cassian has buried everyone he ever loved except the ones who betrayed him. Forgive him if he confuses control with mercy." Lila looked across the penthouse. Cassian stood near the windows, phone to his ear, shirt replaced, face carved from shadow and restraint. Men twice Lila's size lowered their eyes when he passed, but when his gaze found her across the room, something in him changed. Not softened exactly, focused, as if the noise of the world disappeared. Mara watched that look with a tired sadness. "He was 17 when his mother died," she said quietly. 23 when his brother was murdered. 31 when he became king by killing the men who betrayed his father. Since then, I have seen him forgive exactly no one. Lila swallowed. Mara glanced at her. "Then you came into the ER and told him if he didn't stop threatening your residents, you'd let him bleed on the expensive floor, despite everything." Lila almost smiled. "He was being rude. He came back the next week with new heating systems for the pediatric wing. I know. He said it was a tax matter. That sounds like him." Mara's expression turned serious. "No, it didn't. That was when I knew we had a problem." Lila looked down at the coffee. Mara continued. "Men like Cassian don't love easily. When they do, it looks like surveillance, violence, bad decisions, and an inability to sleep unless they know which window your bedroom faces. That's not love." "No," Mara said. "It's fear wearing armor. Love is what he does after you teach him to take it off." Lila's throat tightened. Before she could answer, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the screens went black. Cassian turned immediately. Generator. Nothing happened. The penthouse dropped into darkness. A red emergency glow pulsed near the floor. Cassian crossed the room toward Lila, already reaching for the gun beneath his jacket. The elevator dinged. Every weapon in the room pointed toward it. The doors opened. No one stood inside. Only a white orchid lay on the elevator floor. Lila's breath stopped. A phone beside the orchid began to ring. No one moved. Cassian picked it up. Victor's voice came through, amused. "You took my groom. I took your hospital." Lila's blood went cold. Cassian's eyes lifted slowly. On the wall screen, backup power flickered on to reveal live security footage from Street Adrian's hospital, the emergency ward. Nurses gathered in fear, patients in beds, armed men in fake police uniforms moving through the corridors. Then the camera changed. Pediatric Ward C. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. "Children." Cassian went completely still. Victor sighed. "You remember the rule, nephew. Blood for blood. Bring me the nurse and the ledger, or I start with the children she loves so much." Lila grabbed the edge of the table. Cassian's voice was deathly quiet. "Touch one child and I will erase your name from every stone in Italy. You have 40 minutes. The call ended. For half a second, no one breathed. Then Cassian began issuing orders with terrifying precision. Teams 1 and 2 to Street Adrian's. No police scanners. They're compromised. Block all exits but the south ambulance bay. Snipers on adjoining rooftops. Mara, get me the old tunnel maps." Lila stepped forward. "I'm going." "No." "Yes." He turned on her. "This is not a debate. It is if those are my patients. He wants you there, and he has children. Cassian's eyes burned. He will use them to make you walk into a bullet. Then don't let him. The room froze around them. Cassian stared at her with raw disbelief. Lila stepped closer. You told me once I was not afraid. I was wrong about that too. No. Her voice shook, but did not break. I am terrified. I'm just going anyway. His jaw clenched. She reached for his hand. Not in front of everyone, he seemed to think, because his fingers went rigid. But she held on, and slowly, painfully, he let her. Cassian, she said, you can't save the part of me you love by destroying the reason I exist. His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, the decision had already cost him. You stay behind me. Fine. If I tell you to move, you move. Fine. If I tell you to run, I will probably argue. Despite the terror, one corner of his mouth moved. Then it vanished. He turned to his men. We go in 12 minutes. The journey back to Street Adrian's felt like driving into the mouth of a storm. Rain hit the SUV roof like handfuls of gravel. Lila sat beside Cassian, wearing a bulletproof vest beneath his coat. Her hair pulled back, her hands steady only because she had trained them to be steady in rooms where people died. Cassian checked a gun with silent efficiency. She watched him. Have you ever been married? He looked at her as if the question was insane. She shrugged faintly. I almost died at one wedding today. I'm curious. No. Engaged? No. Lover? His hands paused. The car moved through red light. Finally, he said. Once. Her heart tightened. What happened? His eyes met hers. She wore the wrong dress. Lila looked away before he could see what that did to her, but his fingers found hers in the dark between them. He did not lace their hands together. He just touched her, a silent anchor. Street Adrian's hospital rose through the rain like a wounded ship, all glass, concrete, red emergency lights, and chaos. The main entrance was blocked by 2 police cruisers that were not real police cruisers. Cassian's men moved through the shadows with predatory silence. They entered through an old service tunnel beneath the laundry wing. The air smelled like bleach, damp stone, and rust. Lila knew the hospital above them by heart, the trauma rooms, the elevators that stuck in winter, the vending machine that stole dollars, the chapel where families prayed for miracles that medicine could not promise. Now, it was occupied territory. Cassian moved ahead of her, gun low, body angled to shield. She hated that part of her, noticed how natural he looked in danger, as if the world had been built with violence in mind, and he had simply learned its language first. They reached the archive corridor below the administrative wing. Mara had been right. Old hospitals kept secrets in basements. Cassian's man opened the archive door with a silent tool. Inside, shelves stretched into darkness, packed with paper files, forgotten ledgers, dead names. Lila knew exactly where emergency intake ledgers from 6 months ago should be. She moved quickly. Cassian stayed close. Too close. You're breathing down my neck, she whispered. I'm deciding whether to carry you out now and apologize later. If you try, I'll sedate you. You'd need a large dose. I know your weight. He looked at her. Even in the dark, she felt the heat of it. She found the ledger. Her fingers shook as she pulled it from the shelf. There it was. Cassian Vale. Male. 34. Unidentified on arrival. Blood marker, irregularity, flagged. Signature. Dr. Lila Everhart. Below it, in handwriting she did not recognize, someone had added a note. Confirm non-air status. Archive copy secured for VV. Lila's stomach dropped. Cassian. He looked down. The coldness that entered his face was absolute. Someone inside the hospital copied it. No, she said slowly. She flipped back 1 page, then another. Hier pulsespel up, because the handwriting appeared again and again, not on medical forms, on donor authorization notes, on administrative overrides, on VIP transfers. signed by the same person. Chief Medical Officer Graham Voss. Herr Voss, the man who had assigned Ethan to her department, the man who had approved her leave for the wedding, the man who had smiled and said, "You deserve peace, Lila." Cassian saw her expression. "Who?" She whispered the name. His face did not change, but his eyes promised ruin. A scream echoed from above. Lila jerked toward the ceiling. Children's ward. Cassian grabbed the ledger and handed it to one of his men. "Get this to Mara." "No," Lila said. "I need—" An explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Cassian caught her against him as the archive shelves rattled. His earpiece crackled. "Boss, they're moving patients. East stairwell. Pediatric floor compromised." Lila tore away from Cassian. He grabbed her wrist. "Lila, let go." His grip tightened. "Not hurting. Begging without looking like begging. If I lose you in this building—" She looked back at him. For once, he did not finish, because there was no threat strong enough to cover that fear. "You won't," she said, then softer. "But if those children die because I hid in a basement, you lose me anyway." His grip loosened. They ran. The hospital was a nightmare in emergency red. Smoke curled through corridors. Alarms screamed. Fake police shouted orders at terrified nurses. Cassian's men moved through side halls, neutralizing threats with brutal silence whenever possible. Lila stepped over shattered glass, blood drops, overturned carts, and a stuffed rabbit abandoned beside an elevator. Her heart nearly split when she reached Ward C. Children huddled behind the nurses' station, some crying, some too scared to make sound. Nurse Pamela Ortiz, gray-haired and fierce, stood in front of them holding a metal four-pole like a spear. "Lila?" Pamela breathed. Lila ran to her. "How many hurt?" "2 minor injuries. 1 asthma attack." They took Dr. Voss to the old surgical theater. Cassian's gaze sharpened. "Victor?" Pamela nodded shakily. "With him." Lila looked at Cassian. "He wants the ledger," she said. Cassian's voice was flat. "And you?" A small boy tugged Lila's sleeve. "Miles, 7 years old. Leukemia. Brave unless thunder was involved." "Dr. Lila," he whispered. "Are the bad men going to shoot us?" Something inside Cassian changed. Lila felt it before she saw it. She knelt in front of Miles, brushing hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart, not tonight." Miles looked past her at Cassian. "Is he a bad man?" Lila glanced back. Cassian stood in black, armed, blood at his collar, surrounded by men who looked like shadows. Then he slowly crouched, keeping the gun out of sight. "Yes," Cassian said. Lila blinked. Miles swallowed. Cassian continued, voice low and calm. "But I am not their bad man." Miles considered this with the seriousness only sick children possessed. "Are you hers?" Cassian looked at Lila. The entire burning hospital seemed to fall away. "Yes," he said. Lila's breath caught. Not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. Cassian stood. "Get them out through the service tunnel." Pamela nodded. Lila helped move the children. Cassian's men formed a protective corridor. One by one, nurses carried the smallest patients toward the basement route. Lila stayed until the last child was moving. Then, a voice came through the ward intercom. "Dr. Everhart, bring Cassian to Surgical Theater 3, or Dr. Voss dies screaming." Lila closed her eyes. Cassian said, "He dies either way." She turned sharply. "No, Voss betrayed you. He still has information. He has a pulse he doesn't deserve. And you promised." Cassian's star was hard. She stepped into his space. "You promised me Ethan alive. Promise me this too." His expression tightened. "You are collecting dangerous promises. I learned from you." That almost broke through his rage. Almost. He nodded once. Together, they walked towards Surgical Theatre 3. The corridor outside the old surgical wing was dark except for flickering overhead lights. Rain streaked the tall windows. Smoke drifted low across the floor. Cassian's men spread out behind them, but he raised one hand. "No, he wants a scene," Lila whispered. "Are you going to give him one?" Cassian looked at the double doors. "No. I'm going to end one." Inside, Surgical Theatre 3 looked like a stage built for nightmares. Old observation windows curved above the room. A single surgical lamp glared down over an operating table, where Dr. Graham Voss sat, tied to a chair, bleeding from his forehead. Beside him stood Victor Vale. He was older than Cassian by 20 years, elegant in a grey suit, silver hair combed back, face handsome in a decayed aristocratic way. He smiled like a man greeting family at dinner. "Cassian," he said warmly, "you look just like your mother when you're about to make a terrible decision." Cassian stopped 3 steps inside. Lila stood behind him, but not hidden. Victor noticed and smiled wider, and the bride. Though I must say I preferred the dress. Lila's voice was cold. "I didn't." Victor laughed softly. "I see why he likes you." Cassian's gun lifted. Victor pressed his own gun to Voss's head. Family reunion first, murder after." Cassian's voice was empty. "You're not family." "No? That's the point of tonight, isn't it?" Victor nodded toward Lila. "She has proof." Lila's hand tightened around the medical bag she had insisted on carrying. Victor's eyes moved to it. "Ledger? Antibiotics," she said. He smiled. "Nurses, always lying for noble reasons." Voss groaned. "Lila, I'm sorry." She looked at him with disgust. "How many women?" His face crumpled. "How many nurses did you help disappear?" Voss sobbed. "I didn't know they would kill them." Cassian laughed once, quietly. Victor looked amused. Lila stepped forward despite Cassian's sharp glance. "You signed the transfers." Voss looked at her, pleading. "He had my son." Victor sighed. "Everyone has a son, a father, a debt, a weakness. It gets boring." Lila looked at Victor. "You built an empire out of cowards." "No, my dear." His gaze slid to Cassian. "I built one out of blood. Then this sentimental orphan stole it." Cassian's face remained unreadable, but Lila saw his hand. Steady, too steady. That was how she knew he was close to losing control. Victor continued, savoring every word. "Did he tell you? His mother begged my brother to claim him, a bastard child from a woman who loved badly. My brother raised him because he was useful. Violent boy, smart boy, beautiful monster." Lila saw Cassian's jaw tighten. "Stop," she said. Victor looked delighted. "There she is, protective little nurse." Cassian spoke without looking at her. "Don't answer him." But Lila stepped beside Cassian now, not behind. "Beside. You think blood makes him less powerful?" she asked Victor. The older man's smile faded slightly. Lila's voice steadied. "I work in an ER. Blood is not legacy. Blood is not loyalty. Blood spills. Blood clots. Blood fails. What matters is who stays when someone is dying." Cassian turned his head just enough to look at her. She did not look away from Victor. "And whatever Cassian is, whoever his father was, he stayed tonight when your cowards aimed at children." Victor's expression hardened. "There is the speech," he said softly. "The moral woman redeems the monster." "No," Lila said. "The monster chose not to become you." Silence. Then Victor shot Voss in the shoulder. Lila lunged instinctively, but Cassian caught her around the waist as Voss screamed. "Not fatal," Victor said calmly. "Don't be dramatic." Cassian's gun remained trained on him. Victor's gaze sharpened. "Where is the ledger?" Cassian smiled faintly. "Gone." For the first time, Victor looked annoyed. Cassian continued. You should know better than to ask a man to bring leverage into a room. Victor's eyes moved to Lila. Then I'll take different leverage. He aimed at her. Cassian fired first. The gunshot exploded through the surgical theater. Victor staggered, hit in the arm, but he laughed as he fell behind the operating table. From the observation deck above, gunmen appeared. The room erupted. Cassian shoved Lila behind a metal cart as bullets tore through surgical lights. Glass rained from the observation windows. His men returned fire from the corridor. Voss screamed from the chair. Lila crawled toward him. Cassian saw. Lila, no. She ignored him, reaching Voss as bullets struck metal around her. She cut the zip tie with surgical scissors, pressed gauze to his shoulder, and dragged him toward cover with more strength than she knew she had. Cassian moved like a shadow through muzzle flashes. He took down one gunman, then another. But Victor was not aiming for Cassian anymore. He was watching Lila. Cassian realized 1 second too late. Victor pulled a second weapon from his ankle holster and fired. Lila saw the gun. She saw Cassian turn. She saw the impossible calculation in his eyes. Then he stepped between her and the bullet. The impact drove him backward. His body hit hers. They fell together behind the surgical cart. For a moment, there was no sound, no gunfire, no rain, no alarms. Only Cassian's weight against her, and the sudden warmth spreading across her hands. Cassian? His eyes were open, too calm. She knew that calm. She had seen it in dying men who understood before everyone else did. No, she said. His hand lifted weakly to her face. Are you hit? The same question from the cathedral. The same madness. She pressed both hands to the wound high on his chest, blood slick under her fingers. You arrogant, stupid man. His mouth twitched. Bride was in danger. Don't joke. I'm not good at vows. Her throat broke. Gunfire continued around them, but farther now. Cassian's men had stormed the observation deck. Victor shouted something, then another shot rang out. Not at them. Lila did not look. Her whole world had narrowed to the man bleeding under her hands. Stay with me, she ordered. Cassian looked at her, like he wanted to memorize her anger. Lila, no. You don't get to say my name like goodbye. I objected. What? His breathing hitched. At the wedding. His fingers brushed her wrist. I should have said the real reason. She pressed harder on the wound. You can tell me after surgery. His eyes softened in a way that terrified her. I objected because I loved you first. Lila's vision blurred. I objected because I loved you badly, quietly, like a coward with cameras and enemies and excuses. He swallowed with effort. I objected because the thought of you promising forever to a man who didn't know how you hum when you're tired made me want to burn the city down. Cassian, stop talking. I objected because I thought losing you alive would be mercy. His breath shuddered. It wasn't. She bent over him, forehead almost touching his. You are not dying after making the most emotionally manipulative confession of your life. His eyes almost smiled. You liked it? I hated it. No. You didn't. She sobbed once, furious. Then the surgical theater doors burst open. Mara rushed in with 2 of Cassian's men and a trauma team Pamela had gathered from the freed staff. Lila snapped back into doctor mode. Gunshot wound, upper chest, possible vascular involvement, airway intact but unstable, heavy blood loss, pressure maintained. Mara looked from Lila's hands to Cassian's face. Move him. Cassian's fingers caught Lila's. She leaned down. His voice was barely audible. If I wake up, when? When? He stared at her. She gripped his hand harder. When you wake up, Cassian Vale, we are going to discuss boundaries, surveillance, emotional honesty, and the fact that you are impossible. His eyes held hers. And if I don't? She leaned closer, tears falling onto his face. Then I'll object. Something like peace moved through his expression. Then his eyes closed. The next 4 hours became the longest night of Lila's life. Cassian was taken into surgery in his own hospital because Street Adrian's belonged to no one now except the people trying to keep him alive. Lila scrubbed in until Mara physically blocked the door. "You can't operate on him. I know his injuries. You love him." The word struck like a slap. Lila stood in the scrub room, bloody to the elbows, shaking with exhaustion and terror. "I'm steady." "No," Mara said. "You're human." Lila looked through the glass at Cassian on the operating table, surrounded by surgeons who were either loyal, terrified, or both. "He saved me." Mara's face softened. "I know. He stepped in front of me." "Yes, he always does that." Lila's voice cracked. "He always steps in front of things and then acts like being wounded is just a scheduling inconvenience." Mara touched her shoulder. Lila broke. Not elegantly. Not like a heroine in a beautiful tragedy. She folded against the wall and sobbed with both hands over her mouth, still wearing Cassian's blood like a second skin. She cried for the wedding that had been a trap, for the women who had disappeared, for the patients terrorized, for Ethan's betrayal, for Cassian's loneliness, for the version of herself who had tried so hard to choose safe that she almost married danger wearing a doctor's smile, and beneath all of it, she cried because the man everyone feared had looked at her like she was the last light in a city built of knives. At dawn, Victor Vale was captured alive 3 blocks from the hospital, bleeding from his arm and trying to bribe a priest for sanctuary. Cassian's men did not kill him, because Lila had made Cassian promise, but they delivered him to a private federal task force with enough evidence from the ledger, Voss's confession, Ethan's recorded testimony, and Victor's own calls to bury him in prison for several lifetimes. Dr. Voss survived. Ethan confessed fully before noon, partly from fear, partly from shame, and partly because Cassian's lawyer smiled at him and said witness protection was a generous alternative to whatever Mrs. Vale might recommend. Lila was not Mrs. Vale, not even close, but no one corrected the lawyer. Cassian remained in surgery for 6 hours, then recovery, then silence. For 2 days he did not wake. Lila sat beside him in ICU, wearing blue scrubs now, because someone had found her a clean set, and because the wedding dress was sealed in an evidence bag somewhere where it belonged. Rain stopped. Chicago woke under pale winter light. The newspapers called it the Street Adrian siege. The police commissioner called it an organized criminal incident. The hospital board called it a tragedy. The nurses called it Tuesday, with worse lighting. Lila called it the night everything false burned down. On the 3rd morning, she woke in the chair beside Cassian's bed to the sound of his voice. "You look terrible." Her eyes snapped open. Cassian was watching her, pale, weak, connected to lines and monitors, still somehow arrogant enough to insult the woman who had kept vigil beside him for 49 hours. Lila stood so fast the chair hit the wall. Then she burst into tears. Cassian's expression changed to alarm. "Don't do that. You were shot. I noticed. You died for 90 seconds. His brows drew together. "That seems excessive." She laughed through tears, then hit his arm carefully where there were no tubes. "You are never allowed to attend another wedding." His eyes moved over her face. "Was it good?" "What?" "The wedding." She stared at him. Then she started laughing again, helpless and half-broken. "No, Cassian. It was not good." His mouth curved faintly. "Good." She wiped her face. "You are impossible. You mentioned we would discuss that." "Yes." "We have a list." "Boundaries," he said. "Yes." "Surveillance." "Definitely." "Emotional honesty." "Especially." His gaze softened. "And the fact that I love you." The room quieted, not because the monitors stopped, Not because the world stopped, because for once, Cassian said it without blood, without gunfire, without using danger as camouflage. Lila sat carefully on the edge of his bed. You don't get to use love as an excuse for control. I know. You don't get to decide where I go. I know. You don't get to protect me by lying to me. His jaw tightened with old instinct, but he nodded. I know. She searched his face. You have to learn how to be afraid without becoming a prison. That one hurt him. She saw it. Good. Some truths were supposed to. Cassian looked at their hands. She had not realized she was holding his until he slowly turned his palm under hers. I don't know how, he said. That was the most honest thing he had ever given her. No dominance, no command, no beautiful threat. Just a man admitting he had built his whole life out of walls and did not know how to become a door. Lila's heart softened despite itself. Then learn. His eyes lifted. With me? He asked. She looked at him for a long time. She thought of Ethan at the altar. Safety smiling with poison under its tongue. She thought of Cassian bursting through cathedral doors bleeding and furious. She thought of children escaping through service tunnels. She thought of his body stepping between her and death without hesitation. And she thought of every terrible, tender, impossible moment that had led them here. I'm not marrying you, she said. Cassian blinked. Then, a faint smile touched his mouth. I'm in intensive care, Lila. Good. Then you can't object dramatically. I could try. I will sedate you. His smile deepened, then faded into something more serious. I don't need marriage. She gave him a look. He corrected himself. I don't need it today. Better. I need you alive. That sounds like control. No. His thumb moved weakly over her knuckles. That sounds like love. Before I learn better words, Lila looked down at their hands. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was not gentle in the way safe kisses were gentle. It was careful because he was wounded. But emotionally it was devastating. A kiss full of everything they had denied, feared, ruined, survived. His hand rose to her hair. Hers rested over his heart, feeling the beat beneath bandages and pain. When she pulled back, his eyes were darker. You waited until I couldn't move, he murmured. You're less irritating this way. I strongly disagree. She smiled. For the first time in months, it did not hurt. Weeks later, St. Adrian's Hospital reopened its pediatric wing with new security, new leadership, and a donation large enough to rebuild 3 floors. The donor was anonymous, which fooled absolutely no one. Lila returned to work, not because Cassian liked it, because she chose it. He struggled with that, badly. The first night she worked late, she found one black SUV across the street and called him immediately. Cassian. Yes? Why is there a car outside my hospital? Pause. Traffic. Try again. Coincidence. Cassian. Another pause. Then, reluctantly, 1 car. No cameras. No following you home, unless you ask. That is not the agreement. It is the first draft. You don't get drafts. I was shot recently. You're using trauma as negotiation. I learned from a doctor. She almost smiled. Send the car away. Silence. Then, through the window, she watched the SUV pull away. Cassian exhaled on the phone as if she had personally removed one of his lungs. Thank you, she said. I hated that. I know. I did it anyway. I know. That was how they began. Not perfectly, not softly, but honestly. There were dinners in quiet restaurants, where half the room pretended not to stare. There were arguments in hospital parking lots. There were nights when Cassian waited in her apartment kitchen making coffee badly because he refused to admit he did not know how appliances worked without staff. There were mornings when Lila woke to find him at the window, watching the city like it might still take her from him. Sometimes she went to him. Sometimes she told him to come back to bed. Sometimes she told him to leave the window and speak. He learned slowly. painfully, like a man disarming bombs inside his own chest. One evening, 3 months after the wedding that never happened, Lila stood outside the same cathedral. It had reopened after repairs. The stained glass above the altar had been replaced, but if you knew where to look, you could still see the difference in color where the bullet had shattered heaven into pieces. She had not planned to come, but grief had geography. So did survival. Cassian arrived 10 minutes later, because he always knew where she was, even when he was trying very hard not to admit how. He wore a black coat. No guards nearby. No SUV at the curb. Progress. He stood beside her in the cold. "Do you want to go inside?" he asked. Lila shook her head. They watched rain gather on the cathedral steps. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Objecting? Yes. No. Not even the bullet wounds? "I've had worse evenings." She looked at him. He shrugged slightly. "Fine. Similar evenings." She smiled despite herself. Then her expression faded. "I almost married him because I thought peace was the opposite of you." Cassian looked at the cathedral doors. "And now I think peace is being told the truth. Even when it's ugly." His face tightened. "I gave you ugly. You gave me hidden." She turned toward him. "There's a difference." He accepted that, with a small nod. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in white cloth. Cassian watched silently as she unfolded it. Inside was a single white orchid petal, dried and fragile, from her bouquet, from the altar, from the moment before everything broke. "I kept this," she said. Cassian's gaze moved from the petal to her face. "Why?" "To remember that I survived the life I almost chose." He was silent. She looked at the cathedral. "And to remember that you came." His voice dropped. "I will always come." She smiled faintly. "That sounds romantic until people remember you arrived with a gun." I objected politely first. "You fired a shot at the ceiling inside a cathedral." God understood the urgency. She laughed, and the sound made something in his face soften so deeply it almost hurt to look at. Then he reached into his coat. Lila raised an eyebrow. "If that is a ring, I'm pushing you down these stairs." Cassian paused. "It is not a ring." "Good." He pulled out a small velvet box anyway. "Cassian, it's not a ring," he repeated. She gave him a warning look and opened it. Inside was a key. Small, silver, old-fashioned. She stared at it. "It belongs to the east entrance of my house," he said. "No guards, no codes, no permission." Lila looked up. His expression was controlled, but she knew him well enough now to see the vulnerability beneath it. "I'm not asking you to move in," he said. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm not asking for anything you don't choose." The rain fell softly around them. He swallowed once. "I'm giving you a door." Lila looked at the key, then at the man who had once only known how to build walls. Her throat tightened. She took it. Cassian's breath left him quietly. She slipped the key into her pocket, then stepped closer. "I'm still keeping my apartment," I assumed, "and my job. I feared. And if I come over, it's because I choose to." His eyes held hers. "That's why I gave it to you." The cathedral bells began to ring. Not for a wedding. Not for an ending. Just the hour turning over the city. Lila looked up at Cassian Vale, the man who had objected at her wedding, saved her from a bullet, terrified half of Chicago, and learned, slowly, painfully, to love her without locking the world around her. "You know," she said softly, "you ruined my wedding." His mouth curved. "You hated the dress." "I did." "You hated the groom." "I discovered that." "You would have been miserable." "Probably." His gaze deepened. "I would have been worse." Something warm moved through her chest. "Dangerous. Tender. Impossible." She touched the scar near his collar, hidden beneath his shirt but known to her fingers. "Then I suppose it's good," you objected. Cassian leaned down. his voice a dark whisper against the rain. "I'll object to every life that tries to take you from me." Lila looked at him with warning and affection tangled together. "Careful." He nodded, understanding. "Too much?" "A little. I'm learning." She smiled. Then she kissed him on the cathedral steps where she had once run from a false future into gunfire. And this time there were no screams, no bullets, no vows spoken out of fear. Only rain. Only bells. Only Cassian's hand at her waist, careful instead of claiming, only Lila's fingers closing around the silver key in her pocket. And somewhere behind them, inside the repaired cathedral, light passed through the new stained glass in fractured colors, falling across the empty aisle where a Mafia boss had once stood bleeding and said the one word that changed everything. "I object."